Hello friends, and welcome to this new session of the Kubernetes. My name is Alok Kumar and today we are going to discuss on the services. Okay, so before discussing the services, let's understand what is the problem and why the services comes into the picture. Okay, so let's draw an image. Suppose that you have one node here. Let's call it node 1, where you have a pod. This pod is a front end and you have a back end pod. Okay, so this particular node have some IP. Okay, let's say 172.24.3.5. so this is the IP. Okay, and this particular pod also have some IP 172.24.3.4, and this particular front end pod have IP 172.24.3.5. okay, so in the front end we configured the IP of the backend pod. Okay, so in the configurations, config file, okay, we configured the backend IP so that the front end is communicating with the backend for any data related queries. Okay, you know that the pod can destroy at any time due to any reason. Suppose this pod gets deleted. Okay, let me change the color. This pod gets deleted. So what happen if this particular pod is the part of the deployment? Then a new pod called C with IP 172.24.3.6 will come into the picture. Okay, so this is the C. B gets destroyed, the backend pod, because this is the part of the deployment, and as per the deployment, one replica of the backend will always exist. We are considering a very simplest scenario. So in that case, the pod, front end pod is healthy and the backend pod is also healthy. Both are currently in the healthy state, but the configurations that we did for the front end have the IP of the previous one. So either we have to do it manually, again update it so that the front end will communicate with the backend pod. Okay, so this is very tedious things. Okay, because we have to change it manually each time, and this requires lots of effort. So we required any endpoint in the middle so that the front end will always communicate with this particular middle layer for any type of communications with the backend. You got my point? So to overcome this problem, the service comes into the picture. Service also have one IP, but it will not get destroyed. So we will configure the backend pod with the services, and front end will communicate with the services to access the data from the backend. Okay, so let's draw a bigger picture now. So you can consider it as a node. Okay, suppose node 1, where you have one pod, front end pod, and you have multiple backend pod. Let's say B1, B2, B3, and here we have services. So front end will have the configurations of the service IP, and service is communicating with the backend. Okay, so this particular services have one endpoint where we define all the IPs. Of which IPs? All the backend. So in this particular sessions, what we are going to do in the lab, we will create a front end pod. For this we going to use Nginx, or let's say we are going to for front end we will use the Ubuntu image, and for the backend we are going to use the Nginx. Okay, then we will create a service, a standalone service. We are not going to attach it anywhere. Okay, and then we will create an endpoint and we will attach it with the services. So these particular services have one endpoint attached where we configure the IP manually. So we are going step by step. We are not playing in this particular video on the basis of labels. We are not creating a service for the deployment. All the things we are going to look into stand alone. We will create a pod, we will create a service, we will create the endpoint, we associate all the IPs of the backend pod to the endpoint, and this endpoint is associated with the services. Okay, then you can understand the importance of the services. Okay, and in the next video we will go into the how many types of services and how we can access it, how we can configure it. But in this particular video we are going to discuss on this particular architecture. So now jumping to the lab session for demonstration. EKS environment. Okay, so we have the client. Okay, and we have two worker node of type T2 small, and for the client from where we are executing our command, kubectl command, is of T2 micro, just to save the cost. Okay, and I am also connected with the environment. Let me show you how many nodes we have. kubectl get node. So currently we have two nodes. Okay, and both of the node exist in the AP South Mumbai region. Okay, so now create two pod as a backend pod. We will name it as a backend 1 and backend 2 using the Nginx image. Okay, so kubectl run backend 1 image that we are going to use is of. Okay, so this is first backend pod and other one is the second one. Okay, two backend pod is created. Now we are going to use the front end pod. kubectl run front end, and for this we are going to use the image as a Ubuntu image. Image is equal to and the command we are going to provide to sleep for let's say 4800 seconds. Okay, kubectl get pod. Okay, so we have two backend pod, okay, and one front end pod. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are just going inside the front end using the bash command. Okay, so let's get the IP first. kubectl get pod output of white. Okay, so this is the front end. Let me copy the IP. kubectl exec it front end. This is the name of the front end pod, front end, and then bash. So I am currently inside the front end. So let's curl it using the IP of the back end. Copy and paste it. So curl command not exist, no problem. Let me download it. Okay, so apt get update %, apt get confirmations and install. So it will install the curl, also update this particular OS. It will not take much time. Okay, now again we curl. So you can see that the Nginx is coming, but our both the backend pod have the Nginx. So you can see that it will come the same. Welcome to the Nginx, same informations. So we will do one thing. Here we can echo. This is the this is the front end pod. Let's go back to the cluster and then kubectl get pod. Okay, kubectl exec it backend 1. Okay, backend 1, and then use the bash command, go inside it, and here you echo this is the backend 1. Okay, why we are doing this? You can get all the informations that we can do the load balancing type of things. Okay, when we create the services and endpoints is defined, at that time when we call the services from front end, for some of the traffic will go to the backend 1 and some of the traffic will go to the backend 2. If we have the same welcome Nginx message each time, then we cannot differentiate. Okay, so that is the main reason we are doing this. USR, this is the default locations here, and then Nginx. Okay, HTML, then index.html. okay, so this is defined. Let me copy it so we don't have to write again and again. D. Okay, kubectl we can exit into the 2, and then we can paste it here what we copied, and then make it 2. Okay, now come out, Control D. Okay, so we are going inside again the front end. If we curl again, then you can see that this is coming as a backend, because we have the pod, what is the IP here, the backend of 0. Okay, when we curl this, curl and then IP, we are going to use this one, so backend 1. Okay, so what we performed, we created the front end pod, we created 2 backend pod, and from front end pod we are just you can say using the curl command we accessing it. Okay, both the backend. Okay, so now if both of them get removed and we configure the front end with the back end, then we have to again reconfigure it. So now to avoid this, we are going to create the services. Okay, so ls, we already created the YAML file. Let me show you, cat services.yaml. So this is the service file having the kind services. Metadata is the services, we are using the same name here. The port, this is the service port. Okay, so when we discussed about the how many types of services we have, what is the port and target port, in that case we will go into the detail, but as a brief we can say that this is the port of the services 8080, and this is the target port, which is the port of the container, means the pod. Okay, so we are using the Nginx, so it is fine to have a 80. Okay, now we go to the we just need to apply it. So currently kubectl get svc is the short code. So you can find we currently have one Kubernetes service, kubectl apply -f services. Okay, so it will create one more services, kubectl get svc short code. So we have two services. Okay, one is the default one and other one which we created having this IP and the port is 8080. Okay, so let's describe it. kubectl svc service. So here you can see that this is the description of services, but we don't have any endpoint. So at this moment, if you go to the front end and try to access curl this particular services, you will not get any informations. Why? Because you are going to access this service and this service don't have any endpoints, so it don't know where to go. Okay, so let's create the endpoint. So we already have the endpoint services as well. Let me catch it. So you can see that the kind is endpoint, name is the services. Okay, and here we have the IP and we have to modify this IP accordingly. Okay, so we have two backend pod that we considered it as a endpoint. Okay, so kubectl, okay, the changes is applied, but we have the older one, so we have to first modify it, then we again need to apply the changes. So let me get the IP first. Kubectl get pod o of right, and here we have the IP. Okay, so first one is 192.168.52.171. okay, so I written it down so that we can modify it. Let me copy another one, copy, and then vi endpoint. So here I am going into the insert mode, and here we are going to change it. So what we copied, we will put it here. Okay, and then for the another IP we have to again write the same thing, IP, we can't use comma, and the another one is 192.168.52.171. okay, this is the IP. So let's save it. Let me cat it to see the changes. So you can see that kubectl get pod O of wide. So we configured both the IP 192.168 to the endpoint. So if we describe now kubectl as we see, so you can see that when we describe the services, we have now two endpoint, okay, and this is the backend endpoint with the port 80 that we are using for the Nginx. Okay, so both the endpoint is defined. So kubectl get pod O of wide. So now we go to the front end, and instead of doing the curl for the back end, we will do the curl for the services. Okay, with using the port 8080, that is we set for the services. Okay, kubectl get svc, okay, output of wide. So this is the service port, service IP, copy, and then we will go to kubectl to the front end. Okay, so instead of calling backend, this time we are calling the services. Okay, curl, then the IP of the services with port 8080. Okay, so you can see that we are getting the traffic from the backend. Okay, let's do it again. Now backend 2, backend 1, backend 2. So you can see it's a kind of balancing type of stuff is going on. So you can understand it that we defined the endpoint, but in this particular videos we did all the things manually. Okay, but in the next session of the Kubernetes service part 2, we will discuss about how many types of services we have in the Kubernetes and how we can define it, and doing all the things in the auto way, not in a manual way. So we will create a deployment and we will create a service for that deployment. So it will work on the labels. Okay, so when we want to scale the deployments, the all the pods, the part of that particular deployment, we have the service have the endpoint of all the pods, so that we can scale it down, we can scale it up. So in this way, and we will going to discuss on all the services of the Kubernetes in the next video. So hope you like my video. If you didn't subscribe my channel yet, please do subscribe it. Okay, share it with your friends. Okay, and this always motivate me. Thanks for watching the channel. Have a nice day. Thank you.